Okay, and we're back. Welcome to the next lesson. So we have our sphere, right? And we're all excited because it's got a neat little animation on it. Now, the animation right now is just being controlled by our little threshold guy, this guy. Bleep, bleep. And our next step we want to do, that by the way, um, is, well, I mean, here's where we're going. We're going to make it so that we're going to have a shader that does all that stuff and also spits off particles right at the little edges of the shader. So we're going to need to identify where those edges are because we're going to put them as particle sources and do all this fun stuff. And a couple other things we're going to learn along the way. So I guess our next step is going to be to identify those edges. Now, remember when we picked out our colors, we were very careful on we could have gone red, blue, blah, 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 but we picked something so that we can actually see things. Now we're actually going to need to get something that's going to tell us just where things are changing. Not the black, not the white, but just the changes in between. This is going to seem kind of silly, but I'm going to do this in what's a shockingly simple way. When I originally was figuring these things out, for some reason it always takes me a while. But if you look at this closely and think about it, really basically the blue minus the red is what you want. Why? Because you don't want to grab just full red, just full blue, but it's simply blue minus red does that. What's the easiest way to get that? We're going to use our handy dandy point wrangle. I know you've probably seen in the past. I love these VOPs and everything, so I'm diving in and moving stuff around. I think it's fun. But we also have wrangles, which if you haven't already learned about them, they're loads of fun too. They're basically another simple thing, but allows us to put some code in, and it tends to be faster in some cases for things like this, where I'm basically saying at each point I want to take its red, take its blue minus its red, and make that the new color, which we can do inside of a VOP. But here's the way. Here it's only 2 lines in one of these guys, so it's a little bit codey, but it tends to be really helpful. If you haven't used these guys before, usually what I grab, I can't see that because it's off screen a little bit. Usually what I grab is you grab one of these default guys and it kind of gives you the Vex. I'm sure you guys are all programmers. You've seen C before and blah, blah, blah. And the only thing is to know that you have to put at signs in front of attributes, and sometimes you have to say that if they're vectors or if they're floats and stuff like that. So in this case, what we're doing is actually blindingly simple. Oh, actually, it was that thing I just showed you a second ago. We're simply going to say that we're going to get a value that is at sign CD, which means the color, and then you can say the blue part of it minus at sign, again, the color, the red part. That's basically what we want, blue minus red. Now, of course, we want to clamp that so it doesn't go below 0, so we're going to say clamping that between 0 and 1, 0, 1, and that gives us a semicolon at the end of the line because it's basically old school like C. So now we're going to say our new color is basically going to be, you use set to make a vector out of 3 things. It's basically going to be val, 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 right? So that's going to give us a black and white version that's going to be, it should be the right colors unless I screwed something up. Hey, I didn't. Look at that. So now this guy, as we change our threshold, does that. Let's actually put a threshold. Let's go ahead and do some animation here. I shouldn't jump away from that too long. Remember our controls over here? We had our base animation. I'm going to, what am I going to do? I feel like in the future we're going to have an A animation and a B animation for the, when we're having one guy, I'm moving my hands again, which you can't see, which is silly. We're going to have an A animation and a B animation that goes from one guy to the other for when one guy goes out and one guy goes in. This I'm going to call base animation, which is basically saying that if you went from F start to F end, F start to $sign, I'm sorry, as frame goes from F start to F end, we're going to go from a 0 to 1. And that will give us a little animation that goes there. For the case of this guy, this disintegration guy, I'm going to have an A and B. I think I actually will do this. This is these decisions we make here tend to ripple on down the line, and I'm always kind of trying to make them correct in the first place. But I will call this, I was going to call it object animation. We'll just call it A animation. And we're going to have a B animation later on, and I'll tell you why. I'm hitting accept out here. Because I'm going to do something like here, But instead of right now, by default, we're going from what, 1 to 240 frames. Great, wonderful. I'm going to go, say this first guy goes just to 160. 150, 160. And the reason is the B guy, later on we're doing transmogrification, or actually also teleportation, it's going to come in on a delay, and I want it to be the one that ends here at FN. And it'll start, maybe like at 80, so go from like 80 to 240. So I want the A guy to disappear earlier. So just to kind of get us used to that, I'm going to grab it, make an A animation, knowing I'm going to have a B animation later. So let's put that in as the threshold. I'm going to paste copy relative references here. So now we got our, and he's gone by, actually seems gone a little earlier than that, so I might even change that. Because then that seemed a little quick. We might zip that down a little bit and not have it go quite as far. I'm going to leave it alone for now, but let's remember that. Let's also put the width out here. Let's go ahead and put a couple things out here we know we're going to use. We know we're going to have width is going to be common among a couple of these things. And also we're going to have like a particle size, which will be useful. Particle size. If we were doing a volumetric thing, which we won't in this tutorial, but this is where I'd probably put the what I usually call divisions and stuff. I'm also going to have particle lifetime. This is basically our lifespan, particle lifespan. And basically the things we know we're going to use a little bit later, I'm just going to put them there for now. And I'll give them some numbers. Remember, we were using 0.1 as our width. And we'll worry about particle size a little bit later. It'll probably be something, small. And then the lifespan will probably be like 5 seconds or something. All to come in the future. Let's grab width and hook it up. The reason I'm doing that, because this guy, we're going to use him a lot later on. Whoops, I just disconnected him. We're going to use him a lot later on. So I'm going to give him some useful stuff. Okay. So this is fun. We're cruising along. So what do we need to do next? There's two big tricks coming up. One of those tricks is we're going to make a shader that you're going to notice that if you zoom in here, the kind of resolution of this is based on how many points we have on our sphere. So if we had like not too many, it would be crappy. And if it was higher, it'd be better. But for our shader, we want it to be, and I will say infinite resolution, we want it to be such a high resolution that it's actually the actual points on the screen. In other words, we're going to do that math, but in the actual 3 space. So when the shader's running and it's going across one of these guys, it still does the math inside there. So maybe when it does like these guys, here they're just a single color, so it's grabbing those points. It's actually going to do a shader across them. So basically what we're going to do inside of our shader is this same math, which is why we went so far to make these things, appropriately named and so forth. We're going to do that same math inside of a shader. For the particles that we're actually going to emit spitting out of these guys, we're going to emit them from here. Let's go ahead and do that first, actually. Let's give them, remember I said I like to do some things in VOPs, some things in Wrangles. In this case, let's give them an outward velocity. And here's, now we're going to get into an artsy-fartsy thing, but my thought when I think things are disintegrating and stuff, I feel like they're different at the beginning than they are at the end as far as how far they go pew 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 out of their guy they're coming from. Maybe you don't actually want to do that, maybe you do, but I'm gonna say I do. So the outward velocity, again, always name things. The outward velocity is basically going to be, is we're going to take the normal. These guys do have normals, right? I'm sure I gave them normal somewhere, right? Didn't, dork. You can either use facet for normals like we did in old school days, but now Houdini 15 has this guy, this SOP called normal, and you can say normal on the points to give it normals. Yoink, pointing outwards. Okay, so now that we've got those normals, what I want to say is I want to say, well, if we're going to do this just directly, we would take this normal, we would just take this normal, right? And we would put this into our velocity. That would be a thought process. And then our next thought process would be, well, we don't want all these guys to be the exact same. We don't want those guys to be the exact same. We want to be some multiplier of that. So let's actually take a multiply. Badunk. We're going to have an overall multiplier that I'm just going to promote as a parameter. And then, and I'll call it nmult, nmult. But then we're going to make it so it's different for each one. We're going to do a random thing. Now, at some point you might be like, well, maybe this shouldn't be random. It should be turbulent, so some guys near or get similar things. Normally I'd say yeah, but this is, as you saw, the final product's kind of going crazy everywhere. We're just kind of going outward a little bit, and it's only the beginning. This is just the first push off the thing. So I'm literally just going to use random. So it will be different per point. And because in my little test here, I didn't think it really looked that bad. So I'm going to bring in an integer. Random, as you know, just gives a random float. And so we can basically have that, and that's really just it. All we're doing is taking the normal, multiplying it by a number, an overall scalar, and then multiplying it by a random 0 to 1 number for each point. And our overall scalar will be like, this is where we're going to say, and again, I'm getting, this is hand wavy, but our guys that are spitting things out, I want them to be different at the beginning than they are at the end. I want them to be nice and strong on one side and weaker on the other. So this nmult, instead of just giving this like 1, right? So it would be, it's kind of hard to see here. I'm going to actually change in your guides. You can scale vectors that it shows up, and I'm going to actually do that a little bit. Remember, we're looking at velocities here. So these are those little those are the tips. They're actually they're shooting outward. But the arrow goes inward because unlike a normal that points outwards, they show velocities as being the tip is where it's going. So you're just going to have to kind of visualize that, which is a little weird. Now, what do we want to do? I'm going to claim that we want to do not very much at the beginning and a lot more at the end, so that when he's disintegrating, the first ones that come out are just kind of sitting on the top and wafting away, and then at the end they go pew, 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 stronger and stronger. So I want this to actually be, you guessed it, the base animation, or the overall animation of the thing. In other words, something that's small at the beginning and large at the end, which we've already handily-dandily made. I'm going to have them be that. So they will change and be stronger and push out at the end. Why? Because I think that was cool. Why do I think it looks cool? Because again, I feel like the gag of this thing disintegrating is it starts out just a little bit and then it starts getting more excited, and goes on and so forth. You might even put a power function on that if you want to be crazy. Okay, so that's basically our particle source. This is actually a good spot for us to stop and go to the next lesson, but I want to give things names because good practices, people. So I'm going to just call this object a particle source. Bonk. And that's it for now. Come back for the next lesson and we'll start moving particles around.